Hey guys, welcome. Thank you for coming out to this track. We've got a whole series of things going on in the streams. We've got another talk after, and then the quarterly workshop will be in here too. I'm John. I'll be in here all day. I'll be helping you guys out as needed. You might have heard me say this earlier as you're walking in. I don't mind if you have beverages in here. Just please be respectful of the room and clean up afterwards. Today we'll kick off this next session. We've got Trevor here. We're very excited about his talk. It generated a lot of really good discussion from us on the CFP side of things when we're evaluating the talks. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be a good overview, and Trevor has a wealth of different experience. So without further ado, Trevor, over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, everyone can hear me all right? I don't know. Oh, it does. Okay. If someone can't hear me, let me know. So today we'll talk about home labbing for fun and profit. So as you can see there, if you type home lab into Google or YouTube or anywhere, you'll get a ton of information. And it's pretty widespread. As you can see here, there's one thumbnail there, built my home lab with only $200. And then right next to that, my $100,000 home lab build. I personally don't have $100,000 to spend on a home lab. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't. But you can see there's a spectrum here. And that's a little bit what we'll talk about is if you're new to home labbing, or maybe you have a small home lab and you want to expand, we'll talk about some options here. That being said, if you have a very specific use case, maybe a search for some videos might help you a little bit, but hopefully I can at least kind of help you wade through everything that's out there. This is focused a little bit on the cybersecurity space. So if you are thinking of building a home lab because you like coding or doing some other IT type projects, this will still apply, but most of my examples will be in the cybersecurity space. So this talk will be successful if you walk out of here with an understanding that you can do this. I know some people often are a little bit intimidated by the idea of a home lab, and I'll get into a few of the reasons why. But there are options for all skill levels. You could be brand new to cybersecurity, or you could not even be in cybersecurity and want to step into that space, and a home lab could help you. I want to give you confidence to apply what you learn here to go home and build a home lab or add to your home lab. And if you understand home labbing as a way to stay up to date on the latest cybersecurity trends and tools, and in this field in practice, this will be successful. So who am I? I'm a detection and response engineer for a continuous glucose monitoring platform, which is pretty neat. I've been a red teamer, a penetration tester, cyber operator in the Air Force. Blue over here is one of my compatriots. My non-work home lab, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from right now, I have a pfSense firewall running some ad blocking. I run a self-hosted Ghost blog server using DigitalOcean for my cloud platform, and several Raspberry Pi projects. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my home lab. So show of hands, who's ever been in an interview and an interview asked you, hey, what's your home lab look like? Or how do you stay up on the latest trends? How do you learn new technologies? I see a few hands. Who here has had a really good answer to that question? I see a couple of hands too as well. That's good. For those of you who have not been in that position, it will probably happen eventually. Some of the questions that fall into this category might be, do you do CTFs or capture the flags? Do you do hack the box or try hack me? Do you have a home lab? How do you stay current? All these things. Are you passionate about cybersecurity? I don't particularly like that question, but it does come up in interviews and people say, hey, show me that you're passionate about this. And other than just saying yes, I'm passionate, I love security. If you have some things to point to or talk about where you're doing this in your free time, that can help in those situations during an interview. So that's kind of where the profit side of this starts to come in, is landing those jobs and demonstrating your skill. So what is a home lab? I keep saying home lab. I don't think there's one single definition here, but there's a couple different things a home lab could be. Maybe you are like the picture on the left and you have a whole room dedicated to your home lab. You have server racks, you have wiring, you have switches, routers, all kinds of stuff, and you have this really cool, awesome, robust home lab. That's not for everyone though, and maybe you're more like on the right side here and you've used an IKEA table to make a rack in your living room for your media server. All of this is fine, right? The point is learning. It doesn't really matter how you do this. The one on the right, you might see an impact on your heating and cooling bill there from those servers running, but other than that, however you choose to do this, is your choice. And to drive the home point further, or the point home further, here's my home lab. That's not pretty. I don't know if you can see down there. There's some Christmas decorations as part of my home lab, some kids' toys laying around, pretty poor cable management. But in all of that, you see my NAS, my firewall, networking equipment, a really awesome sitting desk, because standing desks are a little bit overrated these days. Sitting on the floor with a keyboard and monitor seem to be the right way to address this. So all this to say, it can look however it needs to look, right? Don't get hung up on it looking perfect or, you know, needing to be a conversation piece when people come over. You can just do this. You know, the technology there, there's an unmanaged Cisco switch. My firewall runs on a Dell Optiplex that I bought off eBay. The spare monitor that is from my college days. Super cool backlit keyboard that my wife didn't like because she doesn't like keyboards for some reason. But you know, in here, I could knock something over, so maybe it's not the best thing in the world. Yeah, take it for what it's worth. So really, what is this? What types of setups do you consider a home lab? Hint, it's anything, right? There is no principle around home labbing. No one's going to say, oh, that's not a home lab. Whatever you define as your home lab is what it is. It could be easy, simple, and cheap, as you kind of saw mine might be, or it could be big and complicated and expensive. There are people whose home labs are in a true server rack. Maybe they found a business that was closing down and they went and bought a server rack. I see someone pointing right here. So maybe we got one in the room like that. So that's awesome. But a couple keys here is document your process and journey, even if it's just for you. One, it's just good practice in case something breaks and you need to rebuild it. But two, you might be able to share it with someone else, right? And I'll get into that a little bit on later slides. But documenting your journey can help you both professionally and personally. If you're in a position at work where you have to do some technical writing, document what you're doing at work, write wiki articles, or maybe you're in some sort of technical writing role and you have to write blog articles or things that need to get published. This can be a good way to practice writing these things in a way that is readable to the layperson. And then I mentioned a little bit in interviews, how do you apply this to your job search or current job? Sometimes you can do home lab stuff just for fun. And a lot of people do, just because we're technologists and we like these kind of things, but it should at least be in the back of your head of how can I use this for the profit piece? You know, how do you answer those questions that I had on the interview slide? How can you use this home lab to your advantage and show that you are building these skills? So I've mentioned the spectrum a couple times, and so here it is. This is not an official spectrum in any way, shape, or form. This is my version of the magic quadrant of home labs, if you will. On the easy and difficult scale, that's referencing like the knowledge required, the time investment, the impact from an outage. And then cheap and expensive is referencing like the money required and the actual investment cost, because a lot of people have different ideas of you know how much we should invest here. And so easy and cheap on the top left there, the easiest for most people and usually free is a virtual machine. I'm going to guess in 2024 that almost everyone here has experience with virtual machines in some way, shape, or form. But it's super easy. There are Linux distributions that are free, that are built for security, or other things that you can use. I lost my TV back there, but you guys still got it. Or existing hardware. So maybe you already have a PC at home or an old laptop sitting in a drawer somewhere that you can use, or even a dedicated PC for this. But those seem to be the easiest and cheap options. So you can start from what you have available already. On the virtual machine side, the only real option used to be like VMware Player, which only allowed one virtual machine, or Oracle VirtualBox. VMware just, I say just, maybe this is in the last 2 or 3 months, VMware Workstation and Fusion on Mac are now free. And those versions allow you networking between virtual machines and better snapshot options. So if you're getting into this, or even if you have your home lab at home, I would highly suggest going and looking at that. It just gives you a lot more options for how you set up your virtual home lab. Getting a little bit more expensive going across the top is cloud servers. So obviously you have to pay for this, although AWS does have some free tier stuff that maybe you could possibly leverage. But at this point, you're paying some money a month, depending on how robust of a setup you get. Going even more expensive, but still pretty easy, would be like a full-on VPC where all of your stuff is isolated on its own in its own virtual cloud, or hosted services. In some cases, depending on what you're trying to do, a hosted version of some of this stuff might be more appropriate than running stuff on your own infrastructure. Getting down into the difficult side, I say CTFs, hack the box. I put those in cheap because they can be free or very low cost, but they're a little more difficult because now you're actually kind of doing something. In your virtual machine, there's kind of, it's a choose your own adventure kind of thing. So that stays pretty easy because you don't have to do anything you don't particularly want to. Now, when you get into CTFs and hack the box, try hack me, now there's challenges and tasks you have to accomplish that might be outside of your expertise, and a great way to learn some of those skills. In that quadrant, I would say cheap and difficult is pet projects and homegrown. These are places where you might be doing something where there's not a whole lot of documentation, and you're kind of out in the wild west of development, or if you're doing security monitoring or testing, whatever the case may be. So that can get pretty difficult, requires maybe a higher skill set or more time investment to learn about that. And then staying in difficult is microservices. So say you're a security practitioner who wants to start learning about containers or microservices hosted in clouds, like cloud functions, cloud databases, things of that nature. You can start getting into microservices. Again, you have to pay. And if you're not a traditional developer, it might be a difficult skill for you to master. So I put that in the difficult category. On the difficult and more expensive side, now we're talking physical servers. So maybe you're actually buying that hardware. Maybe you found, again, a server on eBay, but then you realize it didn't come with hard drives. Now you have to spend a couple of $100 on RAID capable hard drives. Don't ask me how I know about that one. Dedicated hardware, again, maybe you go out and buy a really beefy gaming PC because you want to do some crazy AI security model training at home. And then lastly, probably the most difficult and most expensive would be running critical services. And so what comes to mind there is there are a lot of people who will get into kind of nonprofit security work. And what I've seen is they'll start running these, like what I would consider critical services for free, for like a nonprofit kind of as a volunteer thing. But then you start realizing like, oh, I have to do this now. I have to maintain this, or I'm creating more risk for that organization. So that's an option, and certainly a way for you to exercise these skills in like a real way that isn't on the job, but might start to get you into some hot water. Or could be critical services at home, even if you want to run your security system as a home lab thing and attach security monitoring to that, that might break the system. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about, say, critical services. So with all that in mind, all of these ideas floating around, where do you start? Like, I want to build a home lab. All of this sounds really awesome, but I have no idea where to start, short of throwing a dart at this chart and seeing where to start. The first step is set goals and expectations. So if you want to build a home lab, or say you even have one, what's your goal? And this will help set expectations a little bit. So if your goal is learning, that's great. You might build it a certain way. If your goal is career advancement, you might focus in a different area. If you're just maintaining your skills, that creates yet a different situation. And if you're a hobbyist, like maybe you just have a bunch of things laying around. I will not in any way, shape, or form claim to be a Raspberry Pi expert, but I have like 5 floating around the house for various things that keep getting repurposed. And that's fine because that's my hobby stuff. But setting those goals will be really, really important so you don't oversubscribe yourself, you don't go buy things you don't need, or you don't burn yourself out at home, because we all know burnout's a big problem in the industry. You don't want to compound that by jumping off into the deep end of home labbing and then creating more stress for yourself. What are you expecting to get from the home lab? This will also drive how and what you do, maybe how you document it, how you showcase this. So are you trying to showcase this? Okay, cool. I might do some more professional technologies. If I'm applying for jobs with modern startups, it probably isn't as useful for me to do a bunch of VMs. It might be more useful to do Docker containers to learn that because I know that they're using modern technologies. You might be trying to solve a tricky problem, either for work or because you went to a conference like this and saw something that was interesting to you and you want to solve the problem. If you're trying to learn something new, sure, maybe you just set up a VM and that's fine. If you've done any certification courses or any learning, that's usually what happens anyways, is you do it on VMs. Or maybe what you're expecting is just that you want something to discuss while you have beers and you want all your friends to see the blinky lights in your living room and ask you what that is. They might not be interested. What you do not want from a home lab, you should define this, but like I mentioned, you don't want headaches from this, right? This is usually extra to work, usually takes time away from other personal hobbies. You don't want this to create more stress in your life, right? So you should approach this with that in mind. And you could end up with a considerable time investment on maintenance. If you say, hey, I want to learn how to secure a web server, so I'm going to run the web server in my living room and open up my firewall and have to defend this thing. Now I have to maintain it, keep it up to date. I have to write new rules. I have to monitor those alerts that come in and actually do something about them. And that can be overwhelming to the point where you just say, hey, I'm going to shut this down. So again, make sure you understand how much you're willing to invest and what that looks like in your life. Speaking of investment, I did mention that this can cost money. It doesn't have to, but it can, especially if you get deep into this. So me, when planning my home lab in terms of money, we have no money. I'm a big fan of open source things. And like I've mentioned eBay a couple times, very good way to get cheap hardware, but maybe it does or doesn't work or doesn't come with the hardware that you need in the case of a server. So think in terms of both money and time. So even though you could set up an entire home network set up in a virtual machine, you could run your firewall in a virtual machine, you could potentially run Active Directory in a virtual machine using some free Microsoft licenses. You could do a lot of things for free, only to find out that this requires a lot of time investment. My story is I decided to put my whole house on an Active Directory domain to learn Active Directory. And my wife was very angry every time I made any change that broke everything. When I told her like, oh, you just need to re-log into Active Directory through this part of your phone in order to get here, that wasn't the solution she wanted. So be mindful of who's impacted by your home lab and what you're doing. Also, the initial investment versus continuing costs. Again, you may be ready for buying the hardware or licenses or whatever you need and installing it and getting everything configured, and then not thinking that 6 months down the road, you need to keep that stuff maintained. How much time are you willing and able to spend? Be realistic. I personally have kids, so my home lab time has decreased. Maybe you're in a similar situation, but if you're doing something that requires daily input, say you set up security monitoring on your home network and you want to clear alerts every day, what happens when you go on vacation for a week? Does that demotivate you from coming home and having to clear hundreds of alerts that popped up while you were out? Those sorts of things. And you start getting into the same kind of mindset as work here. Where you're like, oh, I have to do these things. I have a requirement to get work done, but it's your home lab. So you want to make sure that you are anticipating the time investment as well. And then also, when you're looking at those free and cheap options, that may limit your capability or capacity. So a lot of free things don't have all the features that you might be looking for in a home lab. And so in some cases, spending money might actually save you time. And you want to make those considerations as well. My example on that one, again, I use DigitalOcean to host some of my stuff. Probably one of the more expensive cloud providers out there, and I could definitely go cheaper, but the work to migrate my setup to another server has kind of prevented me from doing that. So in that case, I wasn't considering the follow-on investment of having to migrate something. I'm like, man, it's not worth the monthly bill for me to sit down for several hours on a weekend and migrate to something else. So that's an example of where that might pop up. So then talking about the impact of a home lab. So it's easy to ignore this part when you're just having fun learning something and the impact is just the joy of something working. You're like, I set up Security Onion and it works and I'm getting alerts, like cool. And maybe you stop there because you get that dopamine hit of like, I was successful. But you should consider the impact in your planning. So are you just learning or are you trying to create, right? And again, this will drive how you approach this. I mentioned setting up Active Directory at home. So do other people rely on parts of your home lab, right? And are you able to address that in a way that is acceptable? Again, I run a home firewall, block ads, and oddly enough, a lot of apps and websites don't work when you block ads. So the people who use my firewall often don't like it that I run that. So I have to be able to support that, and have time to update rules and allow lists and things of that nature. What happens when something breaks and you don't have time to fix it? Again, say you're on vacation and your home lab breaks for some reason. Does that cause any issues when you're not at home? Are you planning to show other people the results of your work, or is it just for you? This will drive how professional it needs to look, how your documentation might need to be displayed, what services you use, where it's hosted, those sorts of things. So definitely understanding where you're trying to make the impact. Can you scale up and down as life and work allows? No one's life is consistent in how much free time you have. So are you able to shelve things when you need? Can you turn it off easily and just not look at it for 6 months while you focus on something else? You should think about those things. And then lastly, document, both for yourself and again, for profit, which I'll talk about a little bit more towards the end of the deck here. But the value in a home lab is amplified when you're able to share this stuff. Okay, it's certainly valuable on its own. You can teach yourself things, you can gain skills, you can learn new things, transition careers, all without documenting, but all of that's amplified when you do document. You can share it. You can go to a conference and be chit-chatting with someone and realize that they have a problem that maybe you've solved in your home lab and point them to a blog link and say, hey, I've done this already in my home lab. Here's some instructions on how to do it. What that looks like, totally up to you. Maybe you run Confluence internally or you pay for hosted Confluence. Maybe you have a blog, either hosted or self-hosted. Medium is very popular. I'm sure everyone here has searched for something and ended up at a Medium article, or GitHub, either just in GitHub as like markdown files, or you could use GitHub pages to kind of create yourself a fancy looking website. But what I recommend is something that can be verifiable to an interviewer. So when they ask you, hey, do you have a home lab? How do you stay current? How do you do these things? You say, oh, I do have a home lab. You explain your whole home lab. By the way, here's my website where you can see all my work that I've done. And then obviously you could have faked that, I guess, but that's a lot of work to fake that. But then they can go there and say, oh, this person wasn't just making it up on the fly. There's actually some stuff here that matches what they said. That can be really, really helpful in those interview situations. So I've been talking about a lot about the ideas, the ways that you can approach a home lab. Now we can get into some real examples of things that people have done for home labs, or how you can further your cybersecurity learning using a home lab. So kind of 3 sections here, and it's a little fluid where things actually fall, but this is the best way I could think to organize this. So basically free and low impact, which I would call like the easy stuff. The middle one, free or low cost and medium impact, a little bit harder, and then medium or high cost and higher impact. This is the stuff that maybe requires a little bit more investment, if you will. So free and low impact, the easy stuff, and these are generally free, is CTFs, Hack the Box, vulnerable VMs. I have a list on the next page of tools, but if you've heard of VulnHub, it's a place where you can download intentionally vulnerable VMs, run it in Workstation or something like that, and hack your way through it. Some people might say this isn't a true home lab. I would probably call that gatekeeping as well. They achieve a similar effect, right? You get some learning, you get to try out some skills in a real environment, and you can easily show your passion for the field in this way. I say may require a VM, or certainly does require a VM in some cases. Something like Kali Linux or Parrot seems to be popular. I put running on VirtualBox, but like I mentioned, VMware Workstation is now free. So honestly, I'd probably recommend that. Just a little bit more robust, but you do you. And many of these, you'll see announcements for CTF events, like, cool, BSidesBoulder is hosting a CTF during the conference, but you can't go to the conference. A lot of these persist after the fact. There's like Pico CTF, Google CTF. I think both of those have their history in there. If you're into the Sans holiday hack, they have the entire catalog of past years still up and available, with the advantage that there's write-ups then for some of these if you're doing them after the fact. So if you're learning and you get yourself to a place where you're stuck, you can pull up a write-up and then do the write-up in your home lab. And then you're getting some hands-on learning from what you're doing. And all you have to do is type in like Holiday Hack 2023 write-up, and you'll get somebody's write-up, and then you go to Holiday Hack 2023 and start doing it. In some of these cases, there are paid versions, like Hack the Box. If you pay, you get like better VPN access. It's a little faster. You can get historical machines. So there are some cases where this stuff, where spending money might be beneficial, but generally they're free. Coding challenges and GitHub issues are another place where you can focus some effort. Coding challenges, the big one that I've seen people use is the Advent of Code. It's a yearly Christmas Advent themed coding challenge with a daily challenge, and you can do it in whatever language you want. So this is a good way to learn a new language. Say you know Python, but you want to go learn, I don't know, Rust. You could go do something like that. GitHub issues, you could start searching GitHub for issues that have security or vulnerability in the title, and start going out and seeing how some of these vulnerabilities pop up in code, maybe how to fix them, or see how other people have fixed them. You could, do is closed and has vulnerability in it and start looking at how some other people did some of this stuff completely free. There's probably millions of repos out there that you could try. Even better if it's something you're familiar with or that you are in the space of, but could be anything. And those allow you to go beyond core cybersecurity. The cybersecurity world is changing towards code, and a lot of organizations want you to have that coding experience for cybersecurity jobs. So this is a way in a home lab environment to do this. Or outside of coding is you could use different technologies. So you could say something runs in a Docker container. You want to port that over to running in Cloud Functions and Redis or something as like a non-persistent data store. I don't know. You could do some of that to learn new technologies based on something that already exists. So you're not having to come up with an idea from scratch. These have little to no urgency, and time commitment can be completely variable, like as much as you want or don't want to do. These are probably not ideal for people who kind of need a push, because there's no urgency here. No one's going to say like, you must get this done by a certain date. But pretty ideal for those with busy schedules and don't want to spend money. Say you're pretty busy and you can only dedicate 2 hours a week and it has to be on a Saturday morning before everyone else wakes up. Like, this is perfect. There's no schedule for this. Other strategies I've seen that are pretty successful for stuff like this is just set time on your calendar, maybe twice a week, an hour, just call it training. I think most employers would allow that as well. Say, hey, I'm bettering my skills for an hour a week by doing some of these things to keep myself fresh. But again, nothing is forcing you into these. So some examples, I've mentioned Hack the Box, Try Hack Me is another one, Sans Holiday Hack. I mentioned Pico and Google. Metasploitable is a vulnerable VM that specifically leverages Metasploit. VulnHub, full of vulnerable VMs of various difficulties and types. Advent of Code, Advent of Cyber. So if you're looking for somewhere to start here, these would be some good places. Anything not on this list does not mean it's not valid, just that I didn't want the list to be too long. You could also just Google search, list of free CTFs, and you'll get a bunch of people who have posted about that kind of stuff. So getting into kind of free to low cost and medium impact, this is kind of your medium difficulty stuff, would be IT infrastructure. And so I said this talk would focus on cybersecurity. The way I see IT infrastructure benefiting people in this room who are probably security practitioners is you can set up simple IT infrastructure and then layer security monitoring on top of that as a way to keep your skills fresh. So then you're learning two skills. One, how to manage some IT components, but then how do you actually secure those? How do you monitor those? How do you detect attacks? So this could be a web server, blog, DNS filtering and blocking, like a PF blocker that I use, or Pi-hole is the other big popular one. Home security monitoring, whether that's your security system for your home or monitoring the network, that kind of also falls into IT security. Things that fall into this category are things that just can't be left unattended. It would probably be wrong to spin up a web server, put it on the internet, and then just leave it for years and years and years and never touch it. I guarantee you that thing is hacked, and you should probably not use it anymore. But these things require at least some consistent input. Maintenance, updates, maybe some low-cost hardware if you want to run it at home instead of in the cloud. If it stops working, someone may notice, which increases the buy-in a little bit. On the blog side, for example, I have a blog. If it goes down, I'm going to notice. Maybe no one else in the world would notice, but I would, and that increases some of my buy-in because I don't like that it's down. So on the previous slide, I mentioned maybe not ideal for people who need kind of a push into this space. This might be a little bit more in that realm where, hey, you need something to motivate you to stay in your home lab. It does require some investment, again, hardware, cloud servers, Raspberry Pi, eBay gear. real estate in where you live. Maybe the people you live with are okay with you taking up the broom closet with servers. Maybe they're not. It just depends on how close you all are. And it's up to you how critical you make this, right? If my Pi hole breaks, or I guess I use PF water, but if it breaks, you can just, there's a toggle to turn it off and everything's fine. So if, I'm in the middle of a busy week at work and, my son's mobile games that have ads galore are breaking, I can just turn it off and say, hey, go for it. I'll fix it later. I don't like to do that, but sometimes that's just what you got to do. These are a little easier to demonstrate the skill and investment required. So again, when you want to go into an interview or have discussions with people and demonstrate what you're doing and learning in a home lab, this starts to up the ante a little bit and say, hey, I'm doing some real stuff. It's very easy to say, I do CTFs, and then people just assume like, sure, maybe you spent 5 or 10 minutes on a CTF to say you did it, versus now I have things to show you. I have examples. I have stories of where this stuff worked or didn't work. So we're upping the ante a little bit there. Some ideas on what you can do here. A hosted blog. So maybe you go out to WordPress and say, I'm going to pay you the $10 a month to host a website, just so it exists. You still kind of have to manage it, but maybe they're managing it on their own. Pi-hole, Security Onion, open source security monitoring. So maybe you want to monitor some of this IT infrastructure you're spinning up or your home network. Maybe you have multiple other things in your lab you want monitored. Maybe you want to monitor devices on your home network, especially if you have kids at home who maybe are starting to use tablets and things. So Security Onion, there's others. If you were at the talk downstairs, you mentioned Suricata as another one. I think Suricata is actually in Security Onion, but you have some options there for open source security monitoring. And maybe you want to solve some personal problems with scripting. This is a good way to spin up infrastructure, learn coding. My example was I made a campsite reservation bot, which maybe here in Colorado, that makes me the bad guy. I'm not sure. But I really, really wanted a reservation at this one campsite. If you're familiar with it, it's the Fire Lookout Tower out near Idaho Springs. Could never get a spot, always filled up. So I had a bot that would text me whenever a reservation opened up. So kind of a cool use of the home lab for personal gain, if you will. But you could solve any other problem. Maybe you're into stock trading and you want to create a bot around that. But all of these fall into that kind of IT infrastructure type realm. And then on the kind of more difficult and higher impact side, this is actually like running critical services that when they break, they really actually impact people. Again, home firewall, Active Directory, own or manage an open source project. So maybe you wrote a tool or took over a tool and it's out there open source and you have to deal with people coming into your issues queue and telling you how dumb your tool is or how it doesn't work. Self-hosted web server or blog rather than hosted by a vendor. Maybe you have an IoT test bench. Maybe you're into car hacking or just testing IoT devices and you need space where you can hook all that stuff up. Or maybe you have to solder connectors down to pins. So that's a little more involved. I would say all of these require at least $100 in initial startup costs, if not more. And you saw the title slide, the $100,000 home lab. You could take this to infinity, I suppose. Downtime here might impact other people or requires immediate input from you to solve an issue. Again, if you're doing like some volunteer work for like a nonprofit, it's probably not acceptable for that stuff to go down. But the reward is high here. You're probably going to learn more. You might be able to demonstrate more involvement, again, in an interview type scenario. Or what this might do is be the start of a startup or a product that you want to market as you go down this route. Usually you're going to get into physical hardware at this point. So you have to consider power requirements. So there's a cost you may not have planned for. Servers kind of eat up a lot of power. Where are you going to put the servers? Can your home cooling deal with the heat? Storage, all that sort of stuff. You start getting into things external to the home lab that you have to consider. Some options here for firewalls like pfSense or OPNsense, Active Directory I mentioned. Create or adopt an open source project. So if there's a tool you use frequently at work and you want to be involved, get into the issue queue on GitHub and establish yourself as a professional there and start interacting. That's one way to get yourself recognized. Maybe you end up on a list of contributors. It's a verifiable way to show your work in the security space. Or maybe you build a wholly new tool because you couldn't find a tool that does exactly what you wanted. I would also say, based on the talk downstairs, maybe you get into building AI bots, potentially in space. I would say blog on your hardware or cloud server. So again, having to figure out how to set up a web server, reverse proxies, secure that, make sure it's accessible over the internet to you and no one else. Again, this is all good stuff in the security space so that when you go and do this at work, you're not completely foreign to the things that your development and infrastructure teams are having to do. And then I put VM network here. A baseline VM network is pretty easy, but say you want to network more than that, say you want to get to like 10, 20 networked devices for your home lab purposes, that starts to get a little difficult. You start having to work in VLANs and how you manage that network. So that ends up in the difficult category here as well. So say none of this strikes your fancy, or perhaps you've done all of this and you have a really robust home lab and you're just out of ideas and you're like, what do I do next? Really, I don't want to say easy. Ways to get those ideas might be rebuilding existing components in a different language, in a different automation framework, porting something that runs as like a Python script to a container or a microservice that runs as needed, or porting it to the cloud in some way. All of these would be good ways to learn something new, but you already have a framework in place, so you're rebuilding something that exists. That at least takes that part of the equation out, and you can focus more on just learning what you want to do in those new technologies. Super helpful if you know there's a technology that you have a gap on, or if you're trying to apply for a job or jobs that use certain types of technologies, or say you want to change careers completely out of security or into security, this might help you. And then going on like full-on tools would be, can you optimize a tool? If you use a tool and you're like, man, it's really annoying every time this tool does something, or it's really hard for me to run, it takes days to install, whatever the case may be, maybe you can optimize it. Maybe it's missing functionality that you can add, and maybe you can port it over to platforms that you do know and understand. So again, maybe something is running very well as a Google Cloud function, but you want to learn Azure Cloud functions. Might be a good way to learn some of those things. I've talked a lot about the interviews, how you can make profit from this, but here we'll talk about it directly. Everything that you build in your home lab can be a stepping stone to bug bounty hunting. So a lot of people in our space are into bug bounty hunting. And as you do that and build out your testing infrastructure, I will say, that is part of your home lab. Or maybe you did all of this for Hack the Box or for VMs off VulnHub, and now you have exactly what you need to go do bug bounty hunting, and it's already all set up and ready for you to go. If you want to do additional security research, again, having done some of this stuff previously, you might already have all the tools ready to go and the knowledge that you need to go do security research. Exploit development, if you're into that, say you want to go to the Pwn to Own competition one year and win all the buku bucks. Maybe that all started in your home lab because you bought a car head unit off eBay and you started hacking away at that, and then you went up there and figured out how to steal a Tesla. Freelancing or consulting, this is not uncommon in our field. So kind of I guess I would call that overemployment, but some people, as they're trying to decide if they want to leave the corporate world for freelance consulting or starting their own business, this could be the start of that. Maybe you just pick up a gig here and there based on what you did in your home lab and you're successful, which then drives you into this next one, which is entrepreneurship. Again, this might be the start of a startup for you. As you get into your home lab, you might find a tricky problem to solve, or you might solve a solved problem better. And now you've done that in a way that's hopefully documented and ready for you to turn into a business. And then lastly, that one is development. So again, if you're a security practitioner and you want to learn coding or how your development teams create apps and why they continue to put vulnerabilities in their apps, this might be a good way for you to kind of become a developer without having to go become a developer. The caveat here requires much more effort and skills beyond cybersecurity, right? If you start wanting to monetize this stuff, your organizational skills come into play, your ability to interface with others start coming into play, which is beyond the scope of this talk. But I just don't want anyone to think that they're going to walk away from their home lab and instantly make $1 million bucks. And so with that, here's the conclusion. Use whatever you have. And whatever level of home lab is appropriate, start there. You don't have to start with a rack of servers and 20 VMs. You can start with a free Cali box and the free Hack the Box subscription and be off to the races. And maybe that's all you ever do. And that's good enough. Don't let the barrier to entry here stop you from starting something. Do document your journey and put it on your resume, again, either through a blog or GitHub or a Medium account, something, document it. If you're doing CTFs or Hack the Box, write up your process. Show them that you know how to write a report. Ideally, it's easily accessible, but maybe you just don't feel comfortable with that. Maybe you keep it private or password protected. That's fine too, and then you can just share it as you need. And you don't need to be a cybersecurity influencer for this to be successful. So you saw the YouTube thumbnails on the first slide. There's a lot of people who are like, look at my amazing, awesome, perfect home lab. I don't know how many people have heard the statement, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think that definitely applies here. It's better that you start and do something than it be perfect. It's better that you do it today and then don't do it again for 6 months and then pick it back up. That's the point here, is that you can do this. It can be at whatever level of effort you want. It's still beneficial almost no matter what you do. You see the big brain meme there. So everyone should get to the big brain picture there by sharing this and using it for profit, but also have fun while you do it. Any questions?
Do you use any of the automated home labbing products like Snap Labs for doing something in the cloud, or like Ludus for doing something on-prem?
I have not, and honestly, at my stage in life right now, I probably don't have the bandwidth to learn new technologies at the moment. So I have not, but I guess are those useful? Have you used those?
I've used Snap Labs before, but yeah, because like one of the things I was looking for is like my barrier right now is just like there's so many choices available, and like I know there would be a short amount of time to set up like an automated lab with either Snap Labs or Ludus, but it's still a lot of like upfront like configurations, whereas I could just go piecemeal, like as you're saying, and then move through that way. So.
Yeah, yeah. I think it depends on your goals. You know, if you're planning to spin up a bunch of VMs, then like certainly that probably makes a lot more sense. If you just need your one VM and you're going to go do CTFs, then yeah, maybe not the investment, but yeah, that's a good call.
Do you have any recommendation for doing like hardware separate sub networks in your home, so that maybe you have, your spouse and stuff on one, and then you have your lab separate, and then there's kind of an easier division?
Definitely, and I've gotten dangerously close to doing that. Most Wi-Fi systems at home provide a guest and a primary network. If you're running your own firewall, you can then VLAN those off into different VLANs and absolutely do that. If I were to go and start over again, I probably would do that. So I do recommend that for anyone who might want to run critical services at home. That's probably a really good recommendation. Also, if you have guests over, it helps them. I've had multiple people not be able to check their email, connect with their work VPN. All their apps don't work, from family members and friends who have come over and connected to the Wi-Fi, and they're like, your internet never works. I'm like, oh, it works exactly as intended.
It's very secure.
Yes, no one cares. I care. I saw this one first and then we'll go there.
Just throw out an unaffiliated plug for Game of Active Directory. It's a scripted, it literally sets up an Active Directory domain with 5 Windows servers with Active Directory, so you can practice all the latest Windows hacks on a domain that they probably work. And if you're not at the point where you can actually do the research, they have walkthroughs. There's like 15 different walkthroughs that you can do, from using pivoting past the hash, that kind of thing. So it takes you from ground zero, I've never hacked a Windows box, to actually understanding a decent amount of an internal.
Awesome. Thanks for that plug. And I'd recommend as well, if you go down that route, that's great. Add to that security monitoring, and then you can walk through each of those steps, learning how to pass the hash and pivot through an Active Directory network while monitoring, and see if you can catch yourself. And that will be immensely helpful as well.
I was going to tack on top of that, write everything up on that. So yeah, just go, write up all the vulnerability, whatever you find, just so that you can provide a write up to whoever. Hey, yeah, I researched this, I know how to write this, because that's going to be a big key. Just, can you write? You communicate.
Absolutely. Back to the interviews, we could probably raise our hands, but like, how many people have read through a job description and one of the required skills, like soft skills, writing, all this, like you think it's boilerplate until you start interviewing people and realize that like there's a lot of people that literally cannot write. So this is a good way for you to practice and see how you do.
Or even write consistently. Like
Yeah.
if your one report is fantastic, but the next 7 are trash, you're not getting that job, man.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Do you have an opinion on like LVM, KVM platforms like Proxmark? Proxmox?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on which ones to use. Again, it will depend on your setup. Like if you have one VM, then you probably don't need that. But if you're setting up a whole IT infrastructure with Active Directory and a firewall and all these things, then probably really useful. I will say that for me, at least, that does become a barrier to me doing things is when I start thinking about like, oh man, am I gonna need like multiple keyboards and monitors and all this? Being able to remotely access them can be one of those things that helps you get past that barrier of having cables running everywhere in order to connect to random things. But it also can be an interesting exercise in home networking if you want to be able to like SSH into things or set up one of those KVM type capabilities and having to do your internal firewall to allow all that.
But the stuff's happening with VMware and Broadcom. I just see a lot of people moving to that, so I messed with it a little bit, but not a crazy amount.
Yeah, I would also. This was a cybersecurity focused talk, but there is a lot of value from the IT side of things. And I think as a cybersecurity practitioner, you gain a lot of credibility if you know how to use and implement tools that maybe your IT brothers and sisters are using. So stuff like that. If you know that at work, people are using those sorts of things to access different resources, it might be beneficial for you to do it just for that reason, just so you can get it under your belt, if you will.
Yes. So I got in here a little late, so I'm not sure if you already went over this, but I think you did a really great job with the presentation. I'm just kind of curious, what do you do currently?
As my job?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get there. There we go. So I'm a detection and response engineer for a continuous glucose monitoring platform. I would say, so like detection and response, so defensive blue team side, the value to me for a home lab is knowing how to detect things going on, which initially was why I first ever put a firewall on my network, was because I wanted to do PCAP at the edge and figure out what devices were doing what and talking to what. So I would probably have a vested interest in doing like security onion, which I've done in the past, do some home network monitoring, figure out how to triage alerts. In my example, I did set that up. I set up security onion on my cloud server and set it up to forward alerts as emails to my Gmail account. And because I didn't do it right the first time, I ended up with like 1,000 emails a day from security onion, which was super awesome. But that's what I might focus on. That being said, maybe I want to get back into red teaming, and I haven't done red teaming in the last year, so I need to like get up to speed on the latest tools. Cool, I'm going to take a pause from that. Maybe I have a kill switch, if you will, or a way to just turn that off and ignore it while I go back and do some hack the box work. So again, your goals matter. But yeah, and I will say, at least for me, doing that security onion type monitoring at home was one of the things that helped me build the skills to get the job that I have. So. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Good luck on your home lab.